Welcome to the International Code Council Region 1 and Region 1 Radio Show. My name is Tim Spears. I'm the host of Region 1 Radio. Region 1 was established in 2014, and we're made up of 3 states, California, Nevada, and Hawaii. That also includes 32 ICC chapters. We are dedicated to excellence in education and engagement to bring individuals together to share their stories. This podcast series was designed to highlight those individuals that make up our region and share their experiences. If you enjoy the show, please make sure to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and subscribe to our YouTube channel. In this episode, we spoke with Mia Marvelli, Executive Director for the California Building Standards Commission. In this episode, we discussed her background, the many functions of the California Building Standards Commission, how the response to the pandemic shaped or changed their work, and resources they provide professionals, and several other topics. Links to everything that we talked about in the show can be found in the show notes. Hey, welcome to ICC Region 1 Radio. We have today with us Mia Marvelli. She is the Executive Director with the California Building Standards Commission. Mia, how are you today?
Good afternoon. It's great to see you, Tim. Thank you for having me. I'm doing well.
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad that we were able to connect. The state of California, many of us code professionals and code officials are right now, we're in that 180-day window of the triennial code cycle, trying to get our ordinances ready to go for the January 1st, 2022 code series. And so I thought this would be great to have you on to at least share a little bit more about the Building Standards Commission, myself included. I know that we all know a little bit, but we don't know a lot about the Building Standards Commission, especially for many of us out in the state of California, but also too, people that listen in, across the country. We also cover, Region 1 also covers Nevada and Hawaii as well. And so being able to share, and hopefully they can, if they have a state code, maybe they can share some of their experiences. But welcome.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we're always happy to talk to other states that conduct rulemaking processes for their local building codes. So that would be great.
Yeah. Well, before we get into California Building Standards Commission, code adoption, and all of that, can you share a little bit about your background and how you got your start in the profession?
Sure, absolutely. I leaned in school more towards the vocational side of things. And so I studied architecture and mechanical design in high school. There was a great program at my high school, and that led into several positions after high school, working for local drafting companies, design companies, and some architectural firms, and even one civil engineering firm. And so I leaned more towards working rather than going to college, although I did attend a local community college and have an AA and drafting and architecture. And then, so what that did is it set me up to work at several state agencies. So in the early 90s, I started with my first state agency, which is the Department of Water Resources, and then I went over to the Department of General Services for a number of years. And then in 2012, I came to the Building Standards Commission, doing the rulemaking process on the technical staff side. And it was later in life that I pursued my architectural degree, so I am a California licensed architect. And in 2016 is when I applied and was appointed the executive director of the commission. So that's kind of my path to this, which is not necessarily a traditional path that most folks take in a design professional world, but it worked for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for me, I think a lot of us can talk about doing things later in life. Like I didn't get my graduate degree until I was, maybe I was in my late 30s, maybe early 40s. Yeah. And so I do think that the life experience definitely helps, especially as we go to transition into different parts of our career. I know when I graduated high school, I was working in healthcare.
Oh, wow.
I went into a healthcare profession and realized that I wanted to do something a little bit different. So it was either the fire service, the working with working in law enforcement, or going into the military. And luckily, I was picked up by a state fire marshal's office in the Midwest. I used to work for the Iowa State Fire Marshal's office for quite a number of years. So And so, yeah, so, that transition, I didn't know what I wanted to do then, but I do know what I want to do now. And so life experience has definitely helped.
Yeah.
So now, so I think a lot of us high performing people, a lot of us that are in these high stress professions, I personally live and die by a lot of my routines. And so I'm very busy throughout the day. And if I don't, one, work out during my lunch hour or have my morning cup of coffee, I'm probably not the same person throughout the day. And so I'm sure that maybe you have something very similar. So can you talk about like your daily routine, maybe how you get started in the morning and how you work your way through the day?
Sure, yeah. I'm more of a morning person, so I enjoy, and I feel like I function better in the morning. And similar to you, I kind of am a routine-oriented person. I'm very comfortable with same. And the day always starts with coffee, and I find that almost like a relaxing time, those first few minutes, to have that coffee and just kind of wake up and think about things. My morning routine is actually shifted due to the pandemic, because I used to get up, get ready right away, and head into the office, because if I liked being the first or second person here, I felt like I could get my day rolling much better being early. But that's changed with the telework roles, right? So now it's a little bit different, and I have this flexibility in the morning of having that coffee while I'm checking emails. And so I do try to make time. I have 2 days a week that I see a trainer to make sure that I at least have some form of exercise during the week. And then I have a larger dog that I walk a few times a week or every day, depending on how the week is going. And so that's kind of my morning routine. And it's always that little mental checklist of what's happening today, what do I need to prep for, what do I need to prep for next week if there's something bigger in the calendar. So that's kind of my day.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, so now, I think I have this further down and maybe my questions, but this might be a good time to bring it up. What are some of the tools that you have to, utilize every day that you can't live without? For me, it's Apple Notes and Apple Reminders. I've been a big note taker now, and so I utilize Apple Notes, and actually it's helped save me on a couple things, because then I can go back, I can search it and do those types of things, and even Apple Reminders, because like you just said, making the mental checklists, I always have to make a list, because if I don't make the list, I'll likely forget it by the time 2 o'clock rolls around. So what are some of those tools that you can't live without?
Well, with the state of California, we use Outlook here, so it's the same type of thing. As I've got that Monday morning calendar reminder, it's my to-do list. And I find that if I copy in emails that I need to address, links to the server on what needs to be reviewed, all of that goes in that Monday morning. Ideally, that's what I'm prepping for the week. But the great thing is it's something that I can transition to the next week and add to it, delete, remove. And I do have someone that helps me with that to some extent, and that person can go in and add to that list, and it's an ongoing priority. So where it used to be that nice yellow long tablet where you'd rewrite it every week or whatever, this gets updated. And to make myself feel good, I leave the strikeout in there so I know that I accomplished something. That's always nice. So those are the tools I use. And Notes is a really tricky one, because it depends. If I am not as savvy with electronic notes. I'm more of a little pad of paper for right now. And then a part of my learning curve is to sometimes retype in those notes so that I am editing as I go along to remind myself of certain things. So that just is what works for me. I wish I was savvier with typing them on the fly.
Yeah, a lot of times I dictate my notes now. And so I'll have my iPhone and I'll open up the Notes app and I just dictate it. Now, I will tell you, sometimes the word recognition on the dictation software is not the best. But at least, for me, when I'm, let's say I'm in the car or I'm at a meeting or something like that where I can quickly jot a quick note, that definitely has helped me. And I'm kind of like you. I think being a notes person definitely is something that is of extreme value. I have too many Post-it notes on my desk that I care to admit, and I seem to never throw them away. So my desk is covered with little pink Post-it notes right now, and so
those are handy too. Actually, I'm glad you brought those up. Those are wonderful tools. Maybe you need one of those little receipt. Where you slam it down, the order's done, so you put it on the receipt thing, and you have it forever.
Yes, like you just said, being able to strike through something, it gives you that sense of accomplishment, right?
Right.
That, it kind of at least makes you feel good. It does me anyway, every time I can check something off my list. So now we talked a little bit about your morning routine and those different things, but how do you maintain a level of balance? I think a lot of us are very busy throughout the day. And I know that that leads to a lot of stress. It definitely leads to a lot of stress in my life. But how do you maintain that good work-life balance?
Well, that has been a challenge, and I think again that having this position later in life, my daughter's grown. I'm an empty nester, and so I have the ability to mentally shift the energy that was used to raise a family and run a household to. It's really primarily focused on this position right now, right? And I'm lucky to have that flexibility. Because when I accepted the position 6 years ago, I knew it was never going to be an 8 to 5 position. It's just not possible. Right. And so it's been quite a challenge to have a work-life balance. One of the things is maintaining that I have this, scheduled workout time that if it was up to me, I would never go. But since it's a scheduled time, I go. Some of the other things I do are, I used to play adult women's soccer for a number of years, and that was a really good outlet and a good stress relief, and it was great exercise. It's gotten a little too hard on my aging body, so I had to let that go. And I have a great group of friends that I go water skiing with during the summer, so that gets me out. And then my latest passion is I enjoy fly fishing. So it's really challenging to be out on the water doing something and check emails. So that allows me to, it used to be that I could do projects around the house and decompress, and that's not working anymore. I have to actually be in an environment where I'm unable to completely shut off from the electronic piece of it for a while, and of course have a backup system in place for that. So that's what I'm doing to decompress and disconnect a little bit.
Yeah, and I actually am fascinated by fly fishing, to be honest with you. You're the first person to tell me that they go out and fly fish. I do like the outdoors myself. I actually hike quite a bit. I go up. I live about 2 hours from Yosemite, so I try to be up there maybe once a month, and be able to, like you just said, it's hard to really check an email when you have no internet connection, and nobody can bother you. And it's really, actually, it's kind of refreshing. Right. It's just you be there with your thoughts and be able to relax and disconnect. Yeah. Where so many of us can't or haven't been able to find that ability. So, but fly fishing, I'm very fascinated by fly fishing. That's awesome. That's how long have you been fly fishing?
Well, as a kid, I used to go fishing a lot with my dad, but it was much different. And then I've been it's probably been 5 or 6 years that I picked it up. And I always liked fishing, but there was a long pause there. And then I thought, well, shoot, this is something I can go back and do. I mean, it really isn't that demanding, but the benefit, like you said, is I get to be out. I do get a little hike in. I get some exercise in, and it requires me to focus on something different than work, and so that's really the decompression and the shut off as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. Like you just said, you have to focus it. I would imagine there is a lot of details associated with fly fishing to be successful in that as well. So, well, that's very interesting. Yeah, that's cool. Now, being part of the Building Standards Commission, like I said earlier, many of us know what the Building Standards Commission is, or at least what piece of it that we relate to the Building Standards Commission. And I'm a fire code official, and so I relate to the adoption of the California Fire Code and its adoption. But can you talk about the functions of the California Building Standards Commission and what are the primary roles and objectives?
Certainly, yeah. So we were originally formed to administer the long name is the California Building Standards Code process, which is Title 24 in the California Code of Regulations. It's that huge suite of codes made up of 13 parts. And so that was our original charge, was to administer that process. And what that really means is work with the different state agencies that have authority to promulgate regulations in Title 24, such as the Office of the State Fire Marshal for the fire and life safety items. And making sure there's a contract in place with the publisher so that it gets published every 3 years. And then that's our big hat, I call it. And then we have a couple of small hats. A couple of our small hats are, we do have authority to promulgate regulations for state buildings, UC, CSUs. So those are somewhat limited, and that's with our BSC banner and some of the code sections. And we work closely with the the Division of the State Architect for their similar amendments to state service, essential services buildings and things like that. And then our other hat is, which is occurred in about 2007, is our authority to promulgate the green building standards found in Cal Green, Part 11. Now, our piece of it is just for non-residential occupancy. So we're in that Chapter 5 and A5 for voluntary, and then it's the Department of Housing and Community Development that authors the residential pieces for single-family, multifamily hotels, motels. So that Part 11, the Cal Green Code, we call it, is really mostly developed by Building Standards Commission and HCD. Now, also the Division of the State Architect has a number of amendments for public schools K through 12 and community colleges. Okay. So those are our big hats. And then, of course, we also receive the local ordinances from jurisdictions. And I'll just do a quick plug because I know it's that time of the season, right? Right. And you may ask this question later about resources, but this is kind of a good opportunity. Is Stuart Tom and I just updated the video. It's available on our website under our resources page that helps with the describing the local ordinance process. We also have a pretty extensive guide on our website that talks about the local ordinance process. Not every single ordinance comes to us, although a lot of jurisdictions just send them to us because by default everything's in one package. But there's pieces that go to HCD, or Housing and Community Development. There's pieces that go to the State Fire Marshal and the Historical Board and things like that. But the majority of them come to us, and then we process them and send a letter of acceptance if it meets the criteria in building standards law. Oh, and I forgot, some of the ordinances also go to the Energy Commission if they're energy related. So that's
it's a good reminder.
Sorry, that's just primarily our those are our hats, we call them, really.
Well, like you just said, we are in that season of a lot of us adopting our ordinances right now, and it's a good reminder that when you do finish up those ordinances, to make sure to file them with their appropriate state agencies. So that way you make sure that you're following all the state statutes and make sure that they get taken care of. So that's a good reminder. I have only been in California now since 2015, so 7 years, or we're almost at 7 years. that was kind of new to me. I'd worked in the state of Colorado. We didn't have per se a state or a state fire code. We adopted it locally, and we did all our amendments and did it that way. And now, when I was working for the state of Iowa, we actually did have a state fire code. And we inspected schools, very similar to what we do here, but I don't think that the process adopting the code was maybe as as structured as what California is. And I think that there's a lot of history associated with California and that adoption process and how amendments get in and how what that process is. Now, speaking of the process, you mentioned kind of how the pandemic has shaped maybe your daily routine. But how did response to COVID-19 and the pandemic maybe shape this last code cycle and the adoption of this last edition or this last round?
Right. Really good question, because we were a little nervous on how that would play out. Our office was we were in the office every day, so we shifted quite quickly with the help of the Department of General Services IT department to get everyone a laptop, to get us the ability to work remotely. Those types of things took a little bit of time, but gratefully we had a server system that we could all access and continue to work on the rulemaking documents. I think a couple of the biggest shifts were the fact that, it was a little bit old school, is when the rulemaking packages were due from the state agencies, they would physically come to our office and get it stamped, and we'd check it, and we'd look at these paper copies. And then we also received an electronic version as well, so that we could, put things online. And so that really shifted, because many of our counterparts at the other state agencies were obviously in the same boat we were. And who's going to print out a 100-page document and bring it in a paper folder? So we shifted and started accepting everything electronically, and gratefully, as software caught up, we've got electronic signatures on a lot of things. And so that was probably the biggest change process-wise. And it created a lot of efficiencies in some ways, because there's always corrections that are needed, right? The other thing that we found was really a benefit is the ability to meet online. And we had a significant increase in the number of participants for our public meetings. So that was huge. So we have, just to give you a little bit of background, is we will administer what we call early pre-cycle workshops, which is the planning and developing of certain new regulations to get interest in it or ask for feedback. That's the early part, and we do that for our rulemakings, and then we co-chair with some other state agencies from time to time. But then our formal public meetings, which are our code advisory committee meetings, those are the technical meetings where the members make recommendations on the code changes. And then, of course, the commission meetings, those were all virtual, because we had this waiver from the governor to be able to meet virtually and not have a physical location, which was a big deal. At first, it was a real struggle, because it was like, well, what platform do you use, and is it working? And, can you hear everybody? And not everybody has the ability to have software. And so there were some hurdles early on, but like anything, let's practice. Let's have early workshops or set up and do that. So that was, I think, a benefit, and I don't think there's any going back. We used to rent an auditorium and have our pre-cycle workshops that way. Well, now we can have them virtually, and I think we get a lot more participation. The tricky part about the public meetings where the state body is required to have a physical location is that could change. We have another waiver that allows us to continue on this way until next July, but we may need to go back to a physical location where people can actually come and attend the meetings. But people are going to want to have both options, right? They're going to want that virtual experience, because why fly to Sacramento and provide testimony if you can just hop on your computer and provide that public testimony? So I think there's some advantages. I think there's some cost savings for travel for sure. And there's some time saving issues. We were starting our meetings sometimes at 10 o'clock because we had members flying in. And you have to wait for that, they've got to get to the venue. And now we can start our meetings at 9 o'clock in the morning. And they can run till 5. We don't have to worry about somebody missing a flight. So those are the types of things that I think have shifted. And I kind of went off on a tangent there, but I think the interesting part about the pandemic itself is there was this concern early on, what are we going to do if we can't administer this code package and adopt the 2022 codes? I mean, that was a real concern. And the bottom line was, we didn't get a waiver not to do it, so we had to figure out how to do it. And you figure it out, right? We got a lot of creative people here. We got a lot of smart minds here. And so we just had to figure it out and get it done. Because it wasn't like put everything on hold. We didn't have that option.
Right. Well, it's one of those things that even in the face of the global pandemic, we all had to try to find ways to be able to continue to do what we do. And find the tools, like you mentioned, being able to, find the platforms where we can all communicate and be able to participate. And like you mentioned, it's good to hear that it's more of an inclusive process now, right? We've got more people that can attend meetings, and even I'm part of the Cal Chiefs organization, our fire prevention officers, and so we host a monthly meeting. And like you mentioned, being able to hold those meetings both virtually and in person will allow so many more of us to be able to connect and be more well informed, I think, than what we've ever been in the history of what we've been doing. And so I think it will just continue to get better. I know in talking with folks with the International Code Council, kind of the same thing, right? They had to figure out how they were going to continue the process during the different code cycles that they had going on at that time, and they did a very good job. I remember I think I even had to testify in Albuquerque. Well, I wasn't in Albuquerque, or maybe it was Rochester, but one of the two, I wasn't there. I was sitting in front of my computer screen, being able to testify, like so many of all of us were, as the committees were being sequestered, I think, in Chicago that last time around. So, but it's definitely COVID. It definitely impacted us, but I think it led to a lot of efficiencies that are going to be helpful for us as we continue to move forward. So. Now, one of the questions, and maybe this is selfish of me, but many of us are dealing with the state housing crisis right now, right? We've got a lot of folks that are working tirelessly on trying to find emergency housing and those types of things. How does the Building Standards Commission, I don't want to say help, but aid local agencies in maybe the emergency housing crisis that the state of California is facing right now?
Well, that is a little bit of a tricky question because it is a little bit outside of our wheelhouse. It's really the Department of Housing and Community Development that has adopted those appendices in the back of the residential code and the building code. And so for our role in that is just making sure that we are communicating and offering ways to, if there are emergency building standards that are needed to address that. We monitor legislation, and when legislation is enacted, we kind of keep a tally of things, knowing that this state agency is going to be promulgating these regs, and we have a little reminder for ourselves if we don't see something that gets included or we ask questions, we kind of follow up with the state agency and say, hey, are you guys going to propose these changes? We know this legislation was enacted. Is there anything special we need to do to help you? So it's really the facilitator part of it. And in the case of emergency housing, it's not a direct effect on us.
Right. But like you just said, being able to facilitate, because there are different pieces of legislation that come out on occasion that A lot of us may not know or may not be as well connected, to Sacramento and understand all that, and being able to facilitate those conversations will definitely help us all. I know a lot of us are looking to those new appendices in the building code, in the residential code, and working through that process as well. So. Now, we talk about, like I just said, not being connected, but how do you stay connected with, because everything seems to always be evolving, and there's always something new that comes out, and different changes, either through legislation or through the codes or construction materials or the building industry. How do you stay informed and up to date on the most recent changes?
Well, it seems like with this electronic world, there's so much more thrown at us that I feel obligated or responsible for reading, and that has become a real challenge, right? So I'm having to sort of filter through what is it I need for my job, because there's so many things out there that would be so interesting to be able to read. And so for one thing, it's because California legislation affects Building Standards Commission so much, that's probably one of the higher priorities that I'm trying to keep track of and informed on. Some of the periodicals that I read are, we get some wonderful electronic news informations from the International Code Council. IAPMO publishes some really great things where they feature certain plumbing code changes that I seem to fixate on because I find that interesting. And then actually it's the National Fire Protection Association magazine that is, I think it's now bi-monthly, we still get a paper copy of that. Something about the paper copy with the pictures, and a lot of those topics are actually related to hazards or emergencies that have occurred in California, or they're directly related to building standards. It's fascinating, the other items that are in there that I don't even think about. But so, there's less of us in the office on a day-to-day basis. We still come in 1 or 2 days a week. And so one of my fun things to do is take those little Post-its and I flag those things. And I think what makes it helpful is the article's maybe a page or two. And so they do a great job of condensing the information. And I flag that and route it around and say, hey, there's a really great article about the tower issue with the external siding that caught on fire in the UK, which was tragic but interesting, and we got a lot of questions about that. What are you doing about this? It's always, what are you doing about it? And then other ones have been related to electric vehicle charging regulations that are in the NFPA. And so those are the things that helps me stay up to speed. But the other thing that helps is the actual dialogue with other folks that are my colleagues. So, for example, I try to make a point to attend some of the ICC chapter meetings. We do have staff that I encourage them to go to participate in those when we can. I do try to attend some of the national hearings, and then I'm blanking on another one. And what the CalBO events and the California County building official events have been really great too, the annual business meetings. And usually I'm there with another colleague to do a presentation, right? Which is your 30 or 40 minute whatever. Well, the true benefit is listening to the other presentations, meeting the building officials that are there and the enforcement folks that are there, and actually hearing what is going on in their world, and then kind of reflecting on, well, how can Building Standards Commission help in any way? And I think it gives me the perspective of, well, first of all, it's very inspiring, because I went from a position where I was assigned just draw these drawings, and I wasn't really involved in communicating with a lot of other people. And with this position, you meet such a variety of people that really care about what they do. And I think that's sort of the inspiring part, but it's also the educational piece for me of, gosh, we're here focused on this, and maybe we should shift gears and focus on this because this seems like a higher priority for, I look at the enforcement community as our client, as a client. That's how I perceive it.
Right.
So one of our clients, we have a lot. So anyway, that's kind of how I try to stay connected.
Yeah, I think like you mentioned, the NFPA journal, I do the same thing. I think that reading that NFPA journal, there are always timely and relevant articles that are very helpful. And I know that they even have an app now that you can look at it on your iPad. Sometimes I like it on the iPad because then I can click the link, like if they have something there and there's a link that you can click and it takes you in another direction. But the bad thing about the links is then I go down a rabbit hole and 4 hours later, I'm as far away from it as I possibly can at this point. So
yes.
Now, you mentioned the networking piece and being able to go to conferences, and that's one of the things that I think a lot of us are valuing, that reconnection, being able to attend conferences again or meetings in person, because the virtual things are great, but then you can't have those side conversations that we always used to have at conferences to be able to talk about things that are impacting us personally in our given jurisdictions, and I think that that's one of the things that virtual, it's a little bit harder to have those types of conversations. Like I've been to a virtual happy hour after it was a conference, a virtual conference, but they had a virtual happy hour, and it was still very difficult to be able to make those connections. And so now that we're able to reconnect again, I think that networking piece is definitely of extreme value. A lot of us missed for those couple years that we weren't able to meet and get together. So
yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And really, that's been one of the great benefits of this position is the relationships that I've made with other folks that I would have never crossed those paths. Right. Yeah.
Right. Now we talk about relationships, but how do you work to build those cooperative relationships? You mentioned being able to attend all the ICC chapter meetings, or many of the ICC chapter meetings in CALBO and the county building officials group. How else do you work on building relationships or cooperative relationships with other code officials or maybe other people within the industry?
Well, it's really the other state agencies as well. That's the other thing, because the majority of our communication is with the other state agencies in the development of the rulemaking, and so it's really a challenge because we're all spread out, and I guess I look at the opportunity as if we have a meeting where we're discussing a topic or collaborating, I try to keep the tone is that we're working together on this. And I think sometimes in state government, the perception can be that we're a control agency. We're a regulatory agency. We control. Right. We say no. And so I think the relationship building needs to be more about, we have tools that can help you do this. And yes, we have to comply with the law, but how can we work within the rules to get this done? And I remember one of the engineers I used to work with at DSA, it was great because it's like there's always a solution. If you really look hard enough, there's always a solution. And so I think that in itself, and that's the culture I try to have here with the team at BSC, is, we're not here to tell people no, we're here to tell people that might not work that way, but let me show you how we can make it work. Right. And I think that goes a long way to build relationships as opposed to let's go play golf or let's go, Right. Which that's good too. Right?
I agree with you on that. And like I had a building official, he's a friend of mine, and he said that he's always trying to work to yes. We always, a lot of us, they look at us being regulators and always saying no. But I'll be honest, I don't like to say no. I mean, honestly, I do want to work to that yes, and it's all about perspective and how do we work together to be able to achieve the goal that everybody wants to achieve. I mean, we don't, and I always tell people, we're not trying to be a barrier to any economic development or wherever you want to be. We just want to make sure that we're doing it safely, and maybe we can share our perspective as we go through that process. So,
and part of that is educating people on the process, right? So that's another piece of it for us that we feel is really important is, we get some folks that come in late to the game, we'll call it, and they're like, well, we want this, this, and this. And I said, well, that would have been good information to know 5 months ago, and here's why. And so how can we do this next code cycle to get this in the code? We have to work within these rules, and so we don't always have the time, even though it sounds like there's a lot of time. We don't always have the time, and the law allows us to do certain things in a rush. So, yeah. So the education is important.
Right, and I talked to Kevin McCosker. He's now retired, but he was the building official for the city of Las Vegas, I think it was Las Vegas. There was a counterpart was North Las Vegas, and he was saying, because he is very big in the code development process and code development world as well. And I said, do you ever think that maybe we should shorten the code process? He's like, no, I actually don't, because if we shorten it too much, then what's going to happen is we're not going to have that good debate to be able to make and to be able to make good code change. And so he felt like, hey, the process is really good in the sense that it allows us to have that good debate, but also too, like you mentioned, it's good to know these things maybe ahead of time and not at the 11th hour when we're trying to move something forward, and it might be something that we can definitely introduce in the next code cycle.
Well, and the national process, the advantage is it is a 3-year process. In California, we make the intervening code cycle that 18-month also. So we get to do it every 18 months. You guys are always busy. There's no really downtime, right? Not really. No.
Now, one of the things that I've noticed, and many people that I talk to, we're definitely, in the building industry, fire code industry, we're an aging profession. We've got a lot of us that are, now seeing that we need to recruit the next generation into a building safety career. And what advice would you give those that are maybe seeking a career? Like you mentioned, you didn't take a traditional path. What advice would you give those that maybe are seeking a career in building safety?
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot, and this is kind of something that is a little bit possibly in a retirement mode for me, of wanting to encourage folks that maybe are in the trades or are labor, more comfortable with labor, and maybe don't have the opportunity to seek a college degree in engineering or architecture or code development. I think the great part is there's certification processes that can create a more vocational path for folks. And so, again, I'm a true believer that the young people learn differently, and not everyone succeeds in the traditional education path. And so, like, for myself, while I did graduate, and it was a real struggle in school for me. And as soon as I entered into the courses where you were actually doing something, you were producing something, you were seeing your results differently than a letter on a paper, I succeeded. And so you get this sense of accomplishment. And I think that sometimes young people might not be exposed to that, or the availability to learn that there's these other opportunities. And so that's what I would encourage is I would I was fortunate enough to be involved in a program where it was a vocational education program, and that's how I got into this path. Otherwise, I'm not really sure what I would have ended up doing. And it isn't. Another thing is, at the time in the early '80s, which it was not necessarily a traditional path for young women to go into, and so that was another aspect. So, long story is, it would be nice for us folks that are aging out and getting ready to retire is to give back and try to find those avenues, whether it's going and doing talks, like I've done talks before at junior high and high school. There's a lot of vocation programs out there if you look for them. I would be interested in, job retraining programs where someone maybe, can't do that physical labor anymore, but they have all of this knowledge of how things go together. That's kind of what I see would be helpful.
Yeah, and I think that I talked to Madison Domineski. She works with ICC, and she mentioned the technical training program that ICC has to offer, especially a lot of a lot of younger folks that are in high school, and in high school maybe going into like a vocational school. But there is a training piece that at least allows them to work towards a ICC certification, so a residential building inspector. And those areas. And I tried to, my son, he just turned 19. I tried to recruit him into this profession, and he thought I was crazy and said, no, I'm not really interested, but maybe 5 years from now he'll change his mind, and maybe I can get him into this profession, because I will say it's given me a lot. And I do find it extremely rewarding. I think that so many of us do. I do find it fascinating. Anywhere from some of the basic inspections that we go to these large logistics facilities that are now using robotics and those types of things are so fascinating to me, to see that no 2 days are the same, and trying to help them see that as well. So
yeah.
Now, we kind of talked about trying to recruit people into the profession, but what makes you inspired for the future? I think for me, it's technology and seeing the advancements that we see every day. But what makes you inspired for the future, especially in building safety?
Well, I think I touched on it a little bit earlier, is really working with the various folks that are involved in this process that truly do care about what we do. That is inspiring for me. I think, and maybe this was how I was raised, is, when I wake up in the morning and I know that I took an oath to do this, administer this process, you tend not to hit the snooze button.
Right.
And so I think I'm inspired by the sheer fact that I have folks here that depend on me for some direction, and so that's a piece of it. But also it's that, I'm always thinking of calendar, and I've only got, so many business days until this has to happen, so many business, and so those are the things that keep me going. But the inspired part is, I am really proud of the process that we administer. I think it's a good process. I'm also inspired by the fact that I'm always looking for ways to improve the process. Nothing's ever perfect. And so it's interesting when you hear from other folks and they say, well, have you ever tried this, or have you done that? And even when it's not positive criticism, I kind of walk away and I go, God, I never thought of that. That's a really good idea. The delivery was a little rough, but that was a good idea. And so, and I'm sure that the team here sometimes goes, oh God, she's been talking to people again. She's coming back with new ideas. So those are the things that inspire me to keep moving forward and making the process better.
Yeah, like you just said, sometimes the delivery may not be the best when you receive feedback, but hey, it's feedback nonetheless.
Right.
And is it going to be something that we can develop a better product overall? Absolutely. So, well, Mia, I want to thank you for your time. I know you're very busy, like you just mentioned. You go from this triennial code cycle into, the intervening code cycle. I mean, there's a lot of things going on. So speaking of that, how can our listeners, and we have people who listen across the country, how can they learn more about the Building Standards Commission, and then also the things that you guys are doing every day?
I'm glad you asked, because that's actually a big component of what we do as our education and outreach portion as well. So on our website, we have a resource tab, and under that tab, we develop quite a few guides. So there's a guide about Title 24, which goes into great detail about how the California codes are developed, what they're based on, the state agencies that are involved in the process, and so on. So that's a great guide. We have guides that help local jurisdictions with the ordinance process that we talked about before. And the nice thing about our guides is generally in there we list the California law that requires us to do what we do. And so it's helpful because you can search for little keywords in these PDFs and you can go right to what you're looking for. I use them all the time, actually, when someone says, oh, I've got a question about this, and I go, I know we've written it 100 times. I'm not going to rewrite this. Let me just go here. So the resource page is great. We also have a guide about the rulemaking process itself. There's two. There's one for the general public if they so choose to want to know about it. But if you want to go into more detail, we actually have a rulemaking guide for the state agencies that has a lot more detail about the requirements in the Administrative Procedure Act and building standards law and things like that. All of that is free of charge and online. The other thing we've done in the last several years is developed short YouTube videos that complement those guides. So if you don't want to read a whole guide, you can listen to a 15-minute video, and it just kind of gives a high-level review of some of those topics. I think we have about 5 or 6 videos now. The local ordinance adoption video that I do with Stuart, that's about an hour long. So that's, goes into great detail because Stuart does a great job of having a lot of resources and timelines online. And then I was thinking about this a little bit more, and we also have a quarterly newsletter. So so I'll just plug that if you subscribe to our listserv, which is on our contact page, you will receive not only the quarterly newsletter, but you'll also receive any meeting notices we have, any information bulletins that we issue that maybe alert people to things that are happening with building standards, like the code is published, or here's a list of legislation that may impact building standards. Those types of things we announce every now and again. And then the unintended consequence of having all of this virtual world is the fact that we have all these on our YouTube channel, which is also right on our homepage, is you can go back and watch the meetings. So you can watch our workshops, you can watch the Code Advisory Committee meetings, and you can watch the Commission meetings. Now, I'll warn you, they're a little technical and they may not be a lot of fun to watch, but it's a little bit fascinating if you've gone through the guide, you've learned about the process, and you say, well, let me just see what a Code Advisory Committee is really like in real life. You can click on one of those videos and watch enough of it to get an idea of, oh, okay, they repeat this, Robert's Rules of Order process, and they discuss the technical aspects of the code package. And then the commission meetings are a little bit different, but the same idea. So you also get a feel for how passionate some of our interested parties are. When we're having code development for accessibility, there's a lot of members of the public that are very passionate about the code changes and how it impacts their personal lives. And so they're quite moving testimonies from some of the individuals. So that really isn't part of our education piece, but the reality is it's there if you ever wanted to go and really see what it's like and how our hearings are run. So I had a couple thoughts on that, and I think that pretty much covers it, but I highly encourage everyone to sign up on our listserv, and our whole web page is, again, we're open to suggestions, but it's a pretty user-friendly web page where you can view the codes online, you can view the rulemaking process online, and then you have the resources that are available there to help you with that. And of course, we have a phone number, and we do answer the phone. So if you call, we will answer the phone and talk to you.
And that's a good thing, because many of us, when we call, I'll be honest, sometimes when I call a state agency, I may not get a live person. And it's hard then to be able to find the people that you need to get in touch with to find the answer that you need. So I will tell you, as somebody that's on this end, absolutely, that's a massive benefit, and definitely I've been able to, thankfully I have some friends that work in some of the state agencies that can put me in contact. I think Susan Dowdy recommended that I reach out to you. So but
we will get back to
you. Yes. So it's one of those things that I will tell you that's a massive benefit. Also, to the resources page, I have benefited from that as well. Somebody that, like I said, came into the state in 2015, not understanding the ordinance process. I watched that 2015, or probably it was right around that time, that video, one of the earlier videos you did with Stuart Tom. I watched that to help me understand the ordinance process and what I needed to do. And then I also had a local fire code official that helped me through the process. And so, but that resources page, and also too, I think for me, there was another document on there. Oh, it was about what my responsibility is as a fire code official.
Yeah.
Yep. And so all of that stuff is of great benefit. And if you've never checked it out, I highly recommend it. Somebody that was new to the state, had several years in the profession, but new to the state, gave me a good understanding of what I needed to do. And I share that with my staff too. We've gone through some of those resources. And now that I hear there's videos, I can at least now, they don't have to listen to me talk. We can then play the video and they can get a little bit more information. So, well, Mia, I really do appreciate it. Thank you again for taking time out of your busy day. I know that you're extremely busy. And again, thank you so much. Now, if anyone wants to, anybody has any feedback for us, please, check us out on iTunes, listen to this podcast, watch the video. And if you have any suggestions, please let us know. We're always happy. Like Mia said, I'm always open to feedback. So if you've got anybody else that maybe we can reach out and talk to and be a guest on the show, that would be fantastic. But with that, we're going to bring the episode to a close. Mia, do you have anything else to add?
No, just thank you for having us, and I couldn't do this without the team here. We have a small but mighty team, and so it definitely takes a village, and we've got a great group of people. So thank you so much for highlighting our office and what we do. We're here to help.
All right, absolutely. All right, thank you, and goodbye, everybody.